Kayata. Okay, let's begin. We are on Daf Yud Gimal Amud Aleph, 13a2. Okay. So, what we were discussing is this idea of rechitza, of washing, and whether or not the idea of washing is relevant in cold water also, or just in hot. Okay? So, I believe we're up to Tashema. Tashema. The Gemara says, come and listen. Let's understand. We're gonna disagree, or we're gonna try and undo what Rav Chizda taught with regards to this concept. Kishe Ameru Asur Melacha. When we said, hey, okay, just put it on mute.
Sorry.
No worries. Kishe Ameru 13a2. Kishe Ameru Asur Melacha. When we said that that the melacha is asur on the fast day, lo amiru ele bayom. We only said that during the daytime. Aval balayla, when it comes to the night, if a person wants to work at night, mutar, you're allowed. Ukisha amru asur b'nihilat sandal. And when we said that it's asur to wear shoes, lo amru ela ba'ir, only in the city. Aval baderech mutar, when you're traveling on the road, it's actually mutar to wear shoes. Ha-ketzad. How does that work? Yotze derech noel. When he goes on the road, he puts on his shoes. Nichnas la'ir. Now he comes to the city, because they lived in the outskirts of the city. He arrives in the city. Choletz, now he takes off his shoes. The Gemara now continues to what our discussion revolves around. And when we said that it's asur to wash yourself, lo amiru ela kol gufo. This idea of rechitza refers to only his whole body. Aval, panav, yadav v'raglav. If he just washes his face, his hands, his feet separately, as opposed to washing or rinsing his whole body, that's not considered rechitza. So the same way, Ray, we said last week, this is not an element. We're not trying to kind of get you out of anything over here. This is what they meant when they said rechitza. Rechitza means when a person is washing themselves off. It's not washing your face. You know? When a person says, I'm going to go have a shower, or I don't have time to have a shower, I'm just going to wash my face off, those two things are different things. So washing panav yadav v'raglav is not part of the gezerah of rechitza. V'chen ata motzeh b'menudeh u'ba'evel. Also, you find this idea b'menudeh, by someone who's been excommunicated. This is something we don't really have so much anymore. I'll explain what it means in just a second. Ube'evel, and also with the morning. We're on 13a, yeah.
You were on 28 before, right?
We're on 13a.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So, these two halachot, minudeh and avel, minudeh means that they used to have people who did something that earned them excommunication from the community. If a person's min nudeh, you can't sit next to them, you can't do business with them, you're not supposed to talk to them. So there's all different things that they would excommunicate someone for. And when the person was min nudeh, there was a halacha that you couldn't rinse your body, you couldn't shower, you couldn't bathe. So also over there, the Braita says that that's only relevant in washing your whole body, but not panav yadav v'raglav. His face, his hands, and his feet. Gemara now continues. My love akulu. What are we talking about over here? Don't we refer to over here with all of the halachot of the Braita, including those when we're talking about washing yourself? So according to that, if we understand that this Braita is now going back on the whole element, so it's referring also to fasting, so we see that the laws.
Can we get you water?
Yeah, please. Excuse me. Thank you.
Cold water, coffee.
The Gemara just says it's not considered water if it's not. Cold water is fine. Cold water is fine. Cold water is probably better. So we're learning over here that in the Braita that this kind of washing, if we're saying that this is true, that a mourner is permitted to wash his hands and his legs and his feet, and what are we talking about when we talk about this kind of washing? If you're talking about hot water, panav, yadav, raglav, misharu, did we allow you to wash even your face, hands, and feet with warm water? We didn't allow that. It's not true. Ve'amar Rav Sheshet taught, Avel asur leoshit etzba'o bechamin. A person who's avel is not allowed to stick his fingers into warm water. So therefore, it can't mean that we're referring over here to a person washing ipanav yadav v'raglav bechamin ela lav. Therefore, it must mean the Braita must be referring to sonan, must be referring to cold, and therefore, when it permits in all of its cases that we're referring to, which is evel, which is menudeh, which is fasting, we said that only limited cold water is allowed. So therefore, when we're talking about the fast day, we're talking about rechitza, cold water, and we're talking about only panav yadav raglav, which means that you can't wash all your body in cold water on a fast day, which disproves that Rav Chizda, who said that you're not allowed to, thank you, Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam she'akol nהיה baro. Which disproves Rav Chizda, who says you can't wash completely in cold water on a fast day.
So just to back up, this is saying that you can't wash your face, hands, or feet with cold water?
Where? Okay, on a fast day?
Yes.
So the Gemara is trying to figure out what it means, what it's referring to. According to the way we just set it up, it sounds like the Braita is saying you're allowed to wash hands, feet, and face in cold water, but that's it. Rav Chizda said you're allowed to wash your whole body in cold water.
Aha, got it.
But the Braita seems to be saying not like him.
So when this says fast, does this include like Kippur? Or this is just one fast that you're...
No, this is the instituted fasts, yeah, okay? The Gemara says, no. You assumed that the Braita is talking about a case and learned something from it, but it's not true. Le'olam bechamin. What's it talking about? It's talking about with warm water, with hot water. But we just said, how could that be? If it's talking about warm water, how could you say that Avel is allowed panav yadav v'raglav? We know that Rav Sheshet said you can't even dip your finger in warm water. Kashalach, udika kashalach, and that you were worried about. You didn't understand according to Rav Sheshet. V'chen ata motzeh b'menudeh ba'avel ashe'ara ka'i. No, this part of the Braita is not referring to Evel and Menudeh. It's going back on the earlier part. So it's almost like, I tell you like this. The halakha of a cookie is mizonot. Okay? If you want to wash fahamotzi, you have to wash, if for bread, you have to wash netilat yadayim. And if there's, what's it called? And if a person eats 5 of them, the halakha is he makes ala mechya. So the Gemara is asking, well, you eat 5 rolls, you make ala mechya, you make bukat hamazon. No. I was just going back to what I started with. We're back to the cookies now. Now the language that we use when we're doing this in the Gemara is Resha, Sefa. Resha means the beginning of the Mishnah. Sefa means the end of the Mishnah. So in the Resha, what are we talking about? We're talking about the fast days. Okay, then we started talking about Sefa, we started talking about Evel and Menudeh. Now the Gemara continued and talked about washing Panav Yadav Raglav. Now we're going back to the beginning. So what are we referring to? We're still referring to Chamin. We're saying you're allowed to wash Panav Yadav Raglav and Chamin, no problem. Which means that by cold, what does it refer? What would you be allowed to do? You'd be allowed to wash your whole body. And still, you could still have your halakha that Avel can't stick even his finger in cold water, in warm water, because that's not what it's talking about. Okay? Okay, the Gemara now continues. Tashma. De'amar Reb Abba Mishum Yossi HaKohen. Reb Abba HaKohen said in the name of Reb Yossi HaKohen, Maaseh, there was a story made by Nafsh Reb Yossi ben Chanina. The sons of Reb Yossi ben Chanina passed away. V'rachatz b'tzonan kol shiv'ah. And the whole 7 days, he would wash himself with freezing cold water. So what do you see? You see that he's allowed to wash his body in cold water even for mourning. The Gemara says no. Hatam over there, kishetechafu avelav hava. Okay, there, since his avelut happened one after the next, there was one avelut followed by another avelut. It was too much to ask of him to refrain from bathing for so long. So therefore, in that scenario, right, because it was one after the other, they allowed.
What were the two avelot?
He had two sons that died, one after the next. So it was too long. So they gave him a special leniency to be able to wash his whole body in sonan in cold water. But generally, that's not the halacha. The Tanya, and we proved this because it says in the Braita, Tichafu avelav ze'achazer bar minan, a person who has mourning, followed immediately by another mourning. Hichbid se'aro mekel batar. If the hair becomes too heavy for him because it's too long, so what do? He's allowed to lighten it, to cut it or trim it with a razor. Umechabes kisuto b'mayim, and he's allowed to launder his garments, even though normally we say he's not allowed to wash his clothing. He's allowed to wash his garments with water because it's too much. So just like we find with regards to cutting your hair and with regards to laundry, in the case of when the morning is much longer, so too Rabbi Yossi also in the Braita, which he would wash pitzona, and that was because of this extenuating circumstance. But generally that's not the case, and therefore that does not disprove Rav Hizda's teaching when it comes to mourning. Amar Rav Hizda says, Bitar avalo v'misparayim. We allowed the person to cut his hair in this extenuating circumstance, dafka with a razor, avalo v'misparayim, not with scissors. What's the reason, right? The reason is, since we're giving you an extra special dispensation, we want it to be clear that this is not the normal allowing you to do so. So therefore, we made you do it in a funny way. You don't normally cut your hair with a razor. Right? If anything, you would shave your beard with a razor, but we Jews were not allowed to even do that. But they made the guy cut his hair in a strange way so that it would be evident that this is something which is out of the regular bounds of the halacha. And it's only because of his special circumstance. B'ma'in,
like someone who has to do something differently?
it's like a shinui. Okay? The Gemara continues, the Rav Chizda continues, and he says, B'mayim, they allowed him b'zeh achazeh. In the scenario of one avelut after another, they allowed him to wash his kisuto b'mayim, v'lo b'neter, v'lo b'chol. They wouldn't allow him to do it with a cleaning agent, or b'chol, or with sand. One of the things they used to do, not mud, they would use sand to wash clothing, to get stains out. Why? Because fine sand acts like an irritant. So if you're rubbing sand on something, like when you sand wood, it gets rid of the irregularities, it gets rid of the pieces. So too, if there's a stain on the baguette, rubbing the stain on it would kind of act as an irritant. It would pull the guk or whatever it was off of the baguette, and it would clean it. So we allowed you to do it with mayim, with water, but not with chol. Again, as something which would depart from the normal scenario, so it would be obvious that this was a heter. Amar Rava teaches, Avel mutar l'chotz b'tzonan kol shiv'ah. Mourner is allowed to wash cold water the whole of the 7 days. Midi dehava abisra v'chamra. Just like meat and wine. Meat and wine, we know, they give a person, we say on the holiday, we say a person has en simcha ela basar v'yayin, right? You have no joy unless there's meat and unless there's wine. So even though a person has basar v'yayin, still, for a mourner, we allowed them to have basar v'yayin. So since we see that there were things that we were allowed to have basar v'yayin on those days, also you'd be allowed to wash with cold water, okay? Now, according to this, the Gemara is now in a little bit of a difficult place, because what we just said was that Avel is not really allowed to wash with cold water, according to Rav Chizda. And the only reason why he was allowed in the Braita was because either of a double barrel, what's it called, Avelut, or if he's washing Panavia da Viraglav, his face, his hands, and his feet. But to do more than face, hands, and feet, and not in a Avelut followed one by the other, we hold that you're not allowed to do that. Metve, the Gemara now asks, turn to Yod Gimel Amud Bet, the Gemara asks on this opinion of Rava. Ena bogeret rasha'a lenavel et atzma. There's different stages in a person's growth, right? There's a katan, there's a ktana, a child, okay? Then there's a bogeret. Then at a certain stage, right, where she starts bringing certain bodily signs that she's growing up, she becomes a bogeret. And after that, she becomes, a full adult. So ena bogeret rasha'a lenavel et atzma. At that age where they're already starting to grow up, she's not allowed to make herself, look disgusting. B'imei evel avia, during the time of mourning for her father. Why not? Because we're worried if people will see her and they'll see her that she's looking terrible with her hair and her clothes and everything is disgusting, then it might cause her, one and done. They say you never get a second chance to make a good first impression, right? We're worried for her future. So therefore we said that she's not allowed to let herself look disgusting. However, that's dafka bogeret. Ha na'ara, what if she's na'ara, which na'ara is younger? So at that stage where she's not yet in the parasha of getting married, rasha'a, she's allowed to let herself look minuvelet, so to speak, and we're not worried about it. The Gemara says, my love, yeah?
With Rava's opinion, it seems like it's a slippery slope. Because they're like, because you can have meat and wine, you can wash yourself with cold water. Like, where's the equation? They're different functions.
Sorry? Can't hear? Again?
They're different functions. The being allowed to eat meat and wine has nothing to do with washing your body. But he's saying, because you're allowed to do one, you're allowed to do the other, then where do you kind of draw the line?
So Rava also holds that there are elements of avelut. That there's no question. His question is, if I see something in the Mishnah that tells me it's asur, so then I'll abide by that. But more than that, I'm not going to abide by. So unless you have a proof to me that this is something which is asur, I'm going to compare it to the thing which I know is mutar.
So unless there's a definite isur, I'm assuming it's mutar.
Exactly. So you need to, it's like the burden of proof is on you. Why? Since I have something which shows me that I'm allowing things even if they have an element of ta'anug and simcha. So therefore, you have to show me that something is categorized as enough of a ta'anug or simcha that we compare it to the other things and not to these. Okay? The Gemara says, my love, what does this mean that she can't let herself be unpresentable? How does that translate? My love, b'rechitza, doesn't this mean that she's allowed to bathe and wash herself? And that's what it means that she shouldn't let herself go? In avelut? Ubemai. And what kind of water would we say that this is true? Ilem bechamin. If you say it's talking about hamin, that right, which means hot waters, ena bogeret rasha'a. So when the Braita says that the bogeret is not allowed to make herself do this, it can't be. If you're going to say that chamin is where it said that she's not allowed, v'ha'amar Rav Chizda, didn't Rav Chizda already teach us? Avel asur leoshit etzba'o b'chamin. Right, you're not even allowed to put in one finger. So it cannot be that the distance from between a regular avel and a bogeret would be so far that a regular avel can't even stick their finger in the water. And a bogeret, hot water. And the bogeret is allowed even to luxuriate in a hot bath in order that suitors should be able to, find her attractive. Okay? That can't be. Let's rather minimize the distance between these two poles. Ela lav bitzonan. It's referring to with cold water. So that's when we're talking about in the Mishnah. So when we say a bogeret is not allowed to refrain from washing, we're talking about with cold water. Okay? And then it turns out that Rava, who holds that a avel is allowed to wash with cold water, finds himself in hot water, yani, because he's against the Braita. Answers the Gemara, no, it's not talking about that at all. You assume it's talking about washing, and then you built, castles in the sky, figuring out what kind of water it is. Not true. It's talking about over here akichul ufirchus, which means they would kichul is the language they would paint the eyelids with some sort of a material that would give them like an eyeshadow or makeup, and firchus is when they would take the hair and plait their hair. So when the person's hair is made up nicely and they have this makeup on their eyes, they look more presentable, and therefore, so she's not going to wash because we're not going to make mutar, but rather we're talking about these other elements of kichul pirchus. So therefore, you have no proof to prove against Rava. Okay, lema misayale. So we've attacked Rava already twice. Let's try now and see if we could bring a proof that he's correct. The Amar Rabbi Abba Kohen Mishum Rabbi Yosei Kohen. Rabbi Abba Kohen said the name Rabbi Yosei Kohen, just like we saw before. Umetu banav shel Rabbi Yosei Chanina. There was a story, Maaseh, where the two sons of Rabbi Chanina died, one after the next. And he bathed in cold water all 7 days, exactly like we just said. Amri, the Gemara says, what do you mean? We answered that already. Hatam kishtechafu avelav ze'achazeh. The reason why we allowed him over there is because his avelut happened one after the next. And if we gave him a kula, when someone, his avelut happens one after the next, so what do we say? If his hair was heavy, he's allowed to lighten it, he's allowed to cut some of it with a razor, and just like we said earlier, he's allowed to rinse his laundry with water. So the Gemara, so therefore this doesn't help because we already gave an explanation as to why that's the case. Now, effectively, this Braita earlier, we tried to bring it as a proof against, correct? Right? The Gemara tried to bring this as a proof against Rav Chizda. Now, the question is, now that we said that tried to bring it as a proof for Rav Chizda, for Rava, why don't we bring it as a proof against Rava? Rava says that you're allowed to wash a kol shiva, but over here we know that his avelut was one after the next, and they allowed him to do that. But if they only allowed him to do that because of that, that proves that without the extenuating circumstances, then you're not allowed to do it. Why is that not a proof against Rava? Yeah? So we'll see if we have a simple answer to this. There's, I think, a simple answer with this.
How did we shift from
the Gemara.
from fasting to mourning?
Because the Braita brought a Braita which talks about fasting and mourning and excommunication, remember? Mm-hmm. So then the Gemara went from that and then challenged the elements of the second part of the Braita, because Rav Chizda, when he talked about Taanit and mourning, he talked about them together. He gave two different halachot, and then we try to attack it or figure out if he's right, if he's wrong, and then we had Rava on that piece. But understand, the laws of Taanit and the laws of mourning are linked, because the point of what we're trying to do here is to almost make ourselves like we're in some form of avelut because of the situation that we find ourselves in with regards to the rain or to whatever's going on around us. Okay? Okay. So now, again, the Gemara does the same thing it did last time. Amar Rav Chizda, betar avelot misparayim. He's allowed to take a haircut with a razor, but not with scissors. to illustrate the difference. B'mayim, with water, v'lo b'neter, v'lo b'chov, v'lo b'ahol. He can do it with water, but not with any cleaning agents, not with any sand, and now it adds another thing, another element of a cleaning agent, which was ahol. I wonder if that's aloe. I'm not sure. No, I'm being serious. Okay? Okay. Now, sorry? Ika da'amri. Ika da'amri, there are those that say, right? Now, by the way, did you understand? So why don't we use this as a proof against Rava? Because I think the Gemara already understands how Rava would get out of it. Because that's where we started. Rava would say, you have a Braita that says, Ze achar ze, and they allowed Rabbi Yossi to bathe. Right?
Right.
Why did he need to be Ze achar ze betzonan?
Because it wasn't Rava the whole body.
Sorry? So Rava says, a regular Avel is allowed to rinse his whole body. Correct?
Because of meat and wine.
So if that's the case, so then why is this not a proof against him? Because you have Maaseh that they let him do what you said you're always allowed to do. They let him do it when he had two sons, Bar Minan, that passed away one after the next. It would be mutar even with one son, according to Rava. Why is this not a question on Rava?
Did we say hot or cold in this case with Rav Abba?
Oh, so you'd imagine that would be the answer, but if you look back, you see, Metu banav shel Yosef ben Chanina, v'rachatz betzonan kol shiv'ah. He washed in the cold all 7 days. So how's Rava going to answer that? Why did he wash in cold? I wonder if maybe the reason why it's not a proof against Rava, right, is because he understood that really he was allowed to, because of extenuating circumstances, rinse in warm water or in hot water. He didn't choose to take it, and it just says that in the Maaseh, v'rachatz betzonan kol shiv'ah. But the dispensation that they gave him was for rechitza. So in other words, the story would actually prove a different point. Not that he did what he was allowed to do, but that he didn't do what he was allowed to do. That's maybe how Rava would answer this Braita, but I need a proof for that before I could say that that's the case.
But if he gave him that permission to do it, then that means that he didn't have the permission before the two sons died back to back.
Right, but what they gave him permission to do was not what he did, according to Rava. You get what I'm saying?
So according to Rava, they gave him permission to wash with hot or cold?
I'm imagining that that's the only way that Rava could answer this Braita.
But if he knows that he can wash with cold, he doesn't need permission.
Sorry?
The permission that he gets because his sons die back to back
Yeah.
would only pertain to the hot water, because he already has permission to wash, to take a shower with cold water, because of the Rav.
Saying cold water is as of right.
The cold water is given; it's mutar.
According to Rava, cold water is a given.
Yeah, so I'm saying like.
So the
only
fact that he had two
permission get
was for hot water.
has to be for hot water, because he already has permission to.
So saying, according to Rava, that's how you'd have to learn what happened. So, but then why did he wash in cold? And the answer is that the story just telling you what happened. It doesn't say this is a braita. Just tell you this is what he did.
Yeah.
So then the proof of the story the story that he did would then just say that Rabbi Yossi did less than what he wanted to, than what he was allowed to do. It wouldn't prove. You understand? That was the.
But did he ask for permission?
He didn't ask for permission.
If he didn't ask for permission, it's just a story, I guess.
When the Gemara brought it, they said, Hatam kishetachfu avelav, detanya techafu avelav ze'achazeh. They brought you a proof. So when he brought the proof, it only talked about hair cutting and laundry. So you see from the story of hair cutting and laundry that we're more lenient where it happens ze'achazeh. We then prove from that there would be a different thing regarding bathing for ze'achazeh. Okay? But Rava would have to explain that Rabbi Yossi was allowed to do more. Otherwise, this story disproves him. Yes.
What's the halacha that we hold regarding a mourner and showering from now? Because I don't know. We didn't say what the end result is. And a mourner's not allowed to bathe in hot or cold. Or
We're not finished yet. Right now, we have two opinions. We're not finished yet.
Oh, you don't. Oh, okay.
Okay. The Gemara continues. Okay. Ika da'amri. Now we're going to go exactly the opposite. There are some that said over in the name of Rava a different understanding. Ika da'amri amar Rava avel asur b'tzunan kol shiva. He didn't say mutar kol shiva. He said asur kol shiva. Okay. The Gemara says, okay, fine. Ma'ishnan basar v'yayin. So in the first case, he said it's mutar because what's the difference between meat and wine? Now the Gemara said it the opposite. Ma'ishna, how come meat and wine is different? That you allowed me to have meat and wine, which also brings you joy, and still, you're allowed to do it. So how come you're not allowed to do this? The Gemara answers, Hatam over there, lefakuche pechadeh. Over there, the reason why we prohibited, we didn't allow. Sorry, I'm just gonna. Okay, if that's okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, whoever that was now got declined. You know what that is? Okay.
Rabbi, sorry, you're gonna have to go back a little bit. The cold drop.
I know, I saw.
Right when you.
Hatam lepakuche pechadeh. So the Gemara asked, if you're saying now an opinion that Rava actually holds that it's asur kol shiva, so then you have to explain to me ma'ishna mi basar v'yayin. Why is it different than meat and wine? And meat and wine, we said, is mutar. The Gemara answers, Hatam lepakuche pechadehu da'avid. We allowed him basar v'yayin because that actually calms him down a little bit because he's so overwhelmed with the death of this person's relative. Okay? But since when it comes to a shower is not something that's going to lower his anguish, his anxiety, his nervousness, his fear. Meat and wine, that's what they do. It'll settle the person, the protein, the wine, that will be the alcohol, it'll calm him down a little bit. In fact, it's one of the things that we serve the person in the first seudah when they come back from the avelut, along with whatever he's eating. You're supposed to give him a little bit of wine, which normally you wouldn't think. What avel? He's drinking wine. Why would he be drinking wine now? But we never actually said it's asur. Why? And the Gemara brings a pasuk because the wine actually helps him a little bit take that edge off of how much pain and sadness he's feeling.
But so does a hot shower.
Rabbi, don't underestimate the power of a hot shower.
Yeah.
Especially after day 3 or 4.
Yeah.
You really want to go to
Yeah.
rather the shower than any bottle of wine.
He said that just now. It doesn't mean that you'd rather this or rather that. It means what it achieves for you is a different category. So when we're talking about pechadeh, a person's fear of deen, of retribution, of the fact that they didn't honor the person the proper way, all these attendant fears and anxieties, the basar and the yayin, they address that. There's no question that the discomfort of the shower, day 4, day 5, might outrank heavily having a steak. Like, I'd rather have pizza and have a shower, no question. Right? I'm with you. Okay. So the Gemara then says, therefore, that's the difference. Okay, lema mesayle. So if now we understand that Rava is saying that he's not allowed to wash in cold water all 7 days. Lema mesayle, let's bring a proof to what he says. And a bogerd rasha'a, same braita. A bogerd is not allowed to make herself disgusting, look disgusting during the time of avelut. Hana'ara rasha'a, but a na'ara is allowed. Bamai, what's it talking about? Ilema bechamin. If it's talking about chamin, ena boged rasha'a, could it be that she's not allowed to refrain from washing in hot water every day of Shiva? Rav Chizda says you can't even stick your finger in. How can it be that there's so much distance between Rav Chizda's understanding of a regular avel and this boger? You're going to allow her to bathe the whole body every day? It's referring to cold water. So therefore, what does this prove? This proves that a bogeret is allowed to wash bitzonan, which proves that a na'ara is not allowed to wash bitzonan, which proves connection and a proof for the words of Rava. It's the Gemara, lo akichulu firchus. It's talking about putting on makeup, eye makeup, and braiding her hair, and therefore there's no proof to what Rava's opinion is from that Braita. Amar Rav Chizda said, Zot omeret, this tells you, Evel asur betachboset kol shiv'ah. We learned from this, according to this, right, that an avel, a mourner, is forbidden from having any sort of laundry for the entire 7 days of the mourning, right? Where do we find this from, right? Since we're expressing something with regards to changing your appearance, because we now brought in this makeup, which makes you look prettier, more presentable. So if we allowed it specifically for a girl who's at that stage of marriageable age, so that would mean that anyone who's not there is not allowed to. So we learn from there that tachboset, to launder for the process of Shiva, is forbidden. V'hilcheta, says the Gemara, here you go, Jonah. V'hilcheta, so what's the halacha on this issue? Avel asur l'chotz kol gufo, ben bechamin, ben betzonan kol Shiva. An avel is not allowed to wash his entire body in cold or hot water the entire 7 days. Aval, but panav yadav v'raglav, when it comes to his hands, his face, and his legs, bechamin asur, he's not allowed to wash in hot water. Betzonan mutar, when it comes to cold water, he is allowed to. Aval lasuch, when it comes to using the oils or rubbing in any of these, moisturizers or any kind of thing like that, they used to do. They would put these oils or they would anoint themselves. Afilu kolshu asur. There, even a tiny amount is prohibited. V'im la'avoid azuama mutar. But what if a person is dirty or full of sweat? It's disgusting. So there, he's allowed to do sicha or do other things in order to get rid of it. Okay? Now, let's continue, because we're going to get now to the end of this. Asur. Slota. Okay, you know what? This is a new piece. Let's continue with this on further. I don't yet know what's going to be with Wednesday. I'm not sure the schedule of Shel Berachot. I'll let you guys know. Be'ezrat Hashem behekdem. Okay? Baruch Adonai le'olam.